Hello, welcome to our Lymond Book Club. I'm Laura.
I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
We are reading Queen's Play by Dorothy Dunnett. We are on part 4, chapters 1 and 2.
And 3 later, though.
And we're going to cover 3 in our next. But we were sort of wrong about, we were not on the same page about how many chapters we were doing. So some of us were also prepared to do part 3, but we're just going to talk about 1 and 2 now. All right. So this is kicking off part 4, the loan and the limit. I don't have any commentary on the quote that kicks off part 4. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on it.
No.
I do, however, have commentary on the quote that kicks off chapter 1, which is in Dieppe again, illegal after screaming, which is horrible.
She's comments.
Yes. So she is free to the man with whom she has made an assignation until she screams, and after she screams, the man with whom she has made no assignation is safe till she screams, but it is illegal after screaming. So date rape was totally fine in ancient Ireland, apparently.
Absolutely fine. And so is any kind of rape, as long as the woman didn't scream. So keep her from screaming and you're fine.
Why do you guys think Dunnett puts this here?
Going in with the hard questions already, huh?
Let me see where this chapter ends. Like, what are we looking at in this chapter?
This is mainly Lymon's return to France in his new guise and his various reunions.
Yeah, talking to Michelle.
It's people discovering that it's him. It's like, oh, you were Tatty Boy, and now you're Francis. Some of them, not all of them yet, but.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually confused by that because I was expecting, with that quote, like I was expecting some sort of violence in this chapter and like, you know, some sort of violent taking advantage of someone or something like that. And it just felt like we get this. So there's some foreshadowing that happens in this chapter, and then there's some few things that are comments that are kind of ominous, but I don't know. I was confused.
I don't know why it's in there either. I wonder a little bit, this is the chapter where we meet Martine, so maybe it's kind of an ironic play on the fact that their connection is totally consensual.
Maybe.
I see applications of it to something that happens in chapter 3, but since you guys didn't read that one yet, I don't want to comment on it. But and one thing I see is just this kind of idea about these ancient laws of Ireland are not necessarily right or applicable, and therefore this idea of questioning your assumption and not like believing a law just because it's the law, it doesn't mean that it's right. You have to question your beliefs and reassess them and perhaps change them in the shiny light of maturity, or realizing that something is not such a great thing after all.
I mean this quote is blatantly obvious that this law is insane, so that could be the message. Yeah, for sure.
So in this chapter, we start out with Lymond and Lyon sailing back to France, and then sort of Lymon's series of reunions. I do love the way she writes this line at the beginning. Under the fond gray-green wind of the west, the sea set to hissing like silk, the timbers dipped, and the wheaten canvas ripe in the pods spilled cold air into the poop where Lyon sat and sneezed. And I just like that, this like beautiful scenery and imagery, and then there's Lyon on the boat sneezing.
Yeah. I also liked the bit about his plan. There was a woman he did not intend to see, a hypocrite he meant to see chastened, and an autocratic courtier he wished to chastise. And it was just like these 3 things. And it makes me wonder if, at least for part of this story, that none of those things were going to happen. Like, I felt like he'll see the woman, the hypocrite will not get chastened, and the autocratic courtier will not be chastised.
Who's the hypocrite?
I thought it was D'Aubigny.
No, that's the autocratic courtier.
It's Lymond.
Oh, I thought that was the reverse. Oh, you're right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I was just thinking Lymond is autocratic and D'Aubigny is hypocritical, but you're right. It works better if it's flipped.
Why does he think Lymond is a hypocrite?
I mean, what is he saying one thing and doing another? So, I don't know, maybe something about his verbally saying people important and caring for them somehow, but yet throwing people away and not caring for others. Yeah.
Philippe, what do you think?
I've got absolutely nothing. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think about everything that's happened and what it could possibly be. Maybe just his dual nature, how he's been, you know, tatty boy this whole time, and then this quick flip to back to Francis, who also isn't the real true Lymond. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily hypocritical, but
I mean, maybe it has something to do. Does Oliamro have, like, people have this idea of Lymond as like this schemer and planner, and, you know, he can do all these things. But is that something that we have a perception of Lymond, or is that something that's like a popular perception of Lymond? Like, because I wonder if the hypocrisy is Oliamro's, like, you totally failed in doing things that you said you were supposed, that I assume, like, he assumes that Lymond is going to be able to do some things and he totally fails in doing those things. And I wonder if that's part of it.
So I think it's because it goes back to their confrontation in part 3, chapter 6 at the end, where he calls Lymond like a puppet master who's manipulating everyone. You know, you've got us all dancing at the end of your strings. And yet Lymond himself is a mess. And Oliamro knows it because he saw him sink into this, you know, alcoholic mess of tatty boy. So he's kind of like, how dare you try to, like, think that you know what everyone else should be doing with their life and be trying to manipulate them into place when you don't know what you're doing with your life and you're a mess.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I find it interesting to think about, like, the image of Lymond as a puppet master and Margaret Lennox as the puppet master. And, like, those two, like, those, both of them has been referred to with, like, marionette strings and all of that. And it's interesting to think about, like, who's more successful at this point in the story. Margaret, you know, at least so far.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
And we also have that Robin compared to like a puppet and a marionette. This guy's just being manipulated by everybody. Yeah. So also the fact that Oliamro, part of the reason he's going back to France is to chastise a hypocrite, it backs up the idea that he does indeed intend to reveal who Lymond is. But right below that, it says, you know, presumably he knew perfectly what was before him, nothing of violence. Daubigny's guilt would take care of that. So he assumes that by revealing both of them, Lymond will be chastened, but he's not going to meet violence, because by revealing Daubigny, like, it's those crimes that were blamed on Tatty Boy will no longer be blamed on him.
Mm.
And, like, his deception will be justified by the criminal.
By, you know, trying to protect the queen, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, he does have this idea of him still, you know, still being chastened. He'll be embarrassed and tarnished, whatever. So yeah, Oliamro thinks the embarrassed rage of his lords and lovers would rise to him in his safe place, thought Oliamro lyrically, and tarnish every shallow spur of pseudo gold.
Mm-hmm.
Why does Oliamro think so badly of Lymond?
I think he feels used, and justifiably so. Like, I think any guilt that Lymond feels over the way that he treats Oliamro is justified, and I think any frustration or anger Oliamro feels about how he's been treated and how other people have been treated is also justified. Like he's not imagining this. And yeah. And I think he also has a really soft heart, William Rowe. And like he sees other people being manipulated and all that. And he's, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I still also think that it's like a combination of coincidence and intentionality on Lyman's part to hide some of the depth of himself from O'Liamro, because O'Liamro is a really perceptive guy, and we know that Lymond is not just shallow and pseudo gold. We know there's a good guy in Lymond, but O'Liamro thus far has missed that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that Lymond is definitely very intentionally hiding his, like, I think if O'Liamro knew his pain and like what drives him, then he would have a lot more sympathy for Lymond. And I think you're right that Lymond is deliberately hiding those things from O'Liamro. I'm still not convinced it's anymore. Like, I think he hides that from everybody. I don't think he wants anybody to see how vulnerable he is. And it even mentions later, there's a really telling line about how angry he is that they're going to see him as juvenile, which makes me so curious about how old he is. Like, give me an age of this guy. But that, like, he deeply, deeply doesn't want anyone to pity him or to see him as immature or vulnerable or any of that. And yeah.
I want to talk more in depth about that line when we get to it for sure. Okay, so then having cut away from Lymond and O'Liamro, who are splitting up, Lymond is going to meet with La Belle Veuve, whose other name was Martine in Dieppe, who is a prostitute or madam.
Mm-hmm.
And we may recall her from page 74, which was Lymond's confrontation with Una when he was in his tatty boy disguise. And Una said, La Veuve at Dieppe will be sore to the heart. Won't you miss her down there on the Loire? So Una knew the whole time who Lymond was, and he knew that she knew. And that explains why right after that scene with Una, we were like, why is he withdrawn? What's going on with him in that scene? It's because he realized that she knew who he was. She could have revealed him and screwed over his whole thing from the beginning, but interestingly enough, she did not.
Yeah. One thing also to keep in mind before we get too far into the Martine business is that O'Liamro also explicitly references the whole marionette thing, where he says, he says busy child, first of all, calling him a child, which Lyman's not gonna like that. Do you not be plotting too hard or the strings of your charm will fall down. So again, there's that reference to like, watch it or you're gonna overstep and all your manipulations are gonna fail, which is not a bad warning to give.
He's already a hair's breadth away, so he has been for most of the book.
Mm-hmm.
You mean of everything falling apart?
Yeah.
Busy child is what O'Liamro has been calling Tatty Boy from the beginning. You'll see it like recurring throughout. And we also find out at the beginning that O'Liamro is 30. So we may guess that Tatty Boy and Lymond is perhaps younger than 30, maybe?
I'm pretty sure he's younger than 30.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure.
I still think like 22 to 25, so.
Yeah. He's younger than that. I'm going to be even more appalled at Margaret Lennox than I have been. So, like, dude, woman, what? Anyway, Martine.
Okay, so we meet Martine, and we have this wonderful greeting where she at first does not recognize him, and then he demonstrates in a way that is brief and rather savagely efficient. So I guess he kisses her so fantastically that she's like, oh, it's you.
Hello.
It's Dionysius is back.
Yeah, so interesting bit here, she explicitly calls him Dionysus, and then a little bit later she says, you're hell's own Apollo, which actually I think before we get super into the Martine thing, that is an interesting motif in this book, the Dionysus and then the Apollo. If Tatty Boy is Dionysus, Vervassel is Apollo. There's a great essay on one of the old mailing lists about the Lymond books, about those two sides of Lymond and how he struggles to reconcile them, which I will put a link to in the YouTube description. But I did want to just like highlight this.
Read it yet, right? Or can
what?
we? Can we read it yet?
I will check and see, but probably not. It's probably got spoilers for the whole book.
I cannot wait
whole series.
to have conversations about the whole thing. Like,
yeah.
I would sit down at a table with like a whole bunch of Lymond people and just talk about all of this.
So this
Francis of Crawford, Quetzalcoatl, like the actual person.
Do what?
Does that make Francis of Crawford Quetzalcoatl?
Why would it?
Well, because that's his next thing. He says Quetzalcoatl, said Lymond. If those are two aspects or like things that he's playing, we've seen that Quetzalcoatl has like a recurring motif in this book. Like it's the mask he took from D'Aubigny. It's sort of, you know.
Is this another way to say Dionysus, though?
I think it is, but I don't think Quetzalcoatl directly correlates to either one, but it is I think more associated with Dionysus. Mm-hmm. But I also wonder if he says it because it's that mask he was wearing, so maybe it's like an acknowledgement that he's wearing masks either way.
I just don't know much about Quetzalcoatl. I wish I did, because it might be because it's recurred so often. I'm thinking there's definitely something to it. So
yeah. So let me just quickly read this. This is from Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy, where he's basically saying that tragedy is made up of these combinations of things. He's talking about Greek tragedy, which is the Apollonian, which is all types of form and structure. Thus, sculpture is the most Apollonian of the arts, since it relies entirely on form for its effect. Rational thought is also Apollonian, since it is structured and makes distinctions. Whereas the Dionysian is inability or unwillingness to make these distinctions, and opposed to the Apollonian. Drunkenness and madness are Dionysian, all forms of enthusiasm and ecstasy. Music is the most Dionysian of the arts, since it appeals directly to man's instinctive chaotic emotions and not to his formally reasoning mind, which is like a direct Tatty Boy to Vervassel comparison. So I do think there's something in this theory, and that it's an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah. It is interesting.
Okay, so we meet Lavouve, and we have this exchange between the two of them, where, very similar to Game of Kings, we can extrapolate that Lymond is getting his information from prostitutes. They're some of his, basically his spies. He's seems to be paying her in sex, along with paying her in jewels, but they also both enjoy it. So it's not, I mean, it's not that sleazy, but it is a transaction, sexual transaction. And I don't know, do you think that Lymond has ever had a sexual relationship that isn't an exchange for some sort of transactive reason?
Not that we've seen so far. Mm-hmm. I mean, the absence of evidence isn't proof of something, but we certainly haven't seen it in the story.
And why does he get on so well with?
From his side, the very first relationship with Margaret Lennox was not transactional, but then it was terrible. So, like,
if it wasn't from his side, it was from her side.
Sure, for sure. And so if that colored his concept of sex, it's not surprising that it's been transactional ever since.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting, I think you commented when we were reading Game of Kings, it's interesting that he gets on so well with prostitutes. It reveals a lot about the fact that he's very likable, and he doesn't make these like class distinctions or anything, like they all love him. But also, I think part of the reason he gets on so well with prostitutes is because we keep having these comparisons of him to a prostitute. So I think there's a part of him that's very comfortable with them because he thinks of himself as the same thing.
Mm. And also, if he thinks of sex as primarily transactional, then prostitutes are just telling the truth about it and everyone else is lying. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually, I was going to mention this when we were reading the last sections, but I forgot, which was the end of chapter 6 in part 3, where Oliamro and Lymond have their confrontation, and it ends with Oliamro throwing money on the table and saying, you know, there's money on the table to pay for your keep this evening. I cannot afford more than one night of you. Basically calling him an expensive whore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of many references to Lymond as a prostitute throughout this book. Do you think it's true? Do you think what he's doing in like this whole book is a form of prostitution?
I mean, he's using sex as a means to an end, whether he's getting paid for it in money or in other services, information, power.
But I also feel like that's a historical reality of, I mean, mostly women throughout history, but not just women, like, and we don't put the label prostitute onto women who have throughout history used their bodies transactionally to survive and to benefit their families, and like that's just a historical reality of life. So no, like I wouldn't put that word on him unless we do it generally for everyone who's doing that, and we don't. So like, but yes, I think the point is real. I think the idea that he is being transactional with his body is absolutely true. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's also just another form of his feeling like he's been used, whether it's you know, using sex to get information, or all these people that want to buy him, George Douglas, the Queen Dowager, want to control him, the way that the Queen Dowager wants to use his sort of spy skills but won't bring him into her councils and use his mind strategically. He's very like hurt and offended by. So I do think there's a part of him that's, you know, he doesn't dislike prostitutes, but I think he dislikes feeling used and feeling like he's only like useful for his body and not for his mind, or something like that.
Or that, I mean, the Queen wants him for his mind, and he knows that, but she also, it's his mind as a tool, not
just as a tool, not to like actually change the strategy of what she's doing, but just to further her own strategy.
Yeah.
So Martine gives him some information, which is that the name of the guy who basically set up the shipwreck in the beginning when they first came to Ireland and the ship crashed into them. And he then, I guess as his, with the transaction, his reward to her for that is he sets himself lightly to please her, and then he sends her jewels afterward.
Yeah. So he knew about Matthias, however you say that, being the captain of the boat that rammed them. So he knew that piece of information, but he didn't know the Antonius Beck piece of information, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Did you guys have any other thoughts on that Martine scene and how he relates to her and interacts with her?
Yeah.
All right. So then he goes to greet Michelle Harrison. And I love the way this scene kicks off, because it's like the mirror of when Oliamro goes to meet Bryce and Bryce is rude to him. Michelle starts out by being rude, like, who's this Crawford of Lymond? Why should I let him in? And then Lymond is left waiting, and he just goes in and like starts talking to Michelle, and like basically is like, you know, drops hints until Michelle's like, oh my God, it's Chatty Boy.
And also he's just like, look again. Yeah.
Like all he has to do is take a second look at him.
Yeah.
The first of many discoveries we have in these next chapters where people realize that Chatty Boy, or Lymond, Francis of Crawford now, is Chatty Boy. So
yeah. I love Michelle. Like this whole scene just made me like him even more.
Why did it make you like him?
Well, I loved the bit about Michelle Harrison's kind of morality was highly personal and was based on fierce and passionately defended convictions. He would have hounded to death for bowelless principles and shoddy thinking, any man setting out to murder a child from some sort of disordered crusading zeal. And so it's just like his, not only is he offended by the moral implications of murdering a child, he's also like, that's just shoddy thinking. Like, you know, he's gonna go after you both for the like crappy moral stance of murdering kids, but also like, don't be an idiot. And yeah, I was like, he just seems like a big bear, like, you know, like, he's not gonna, like, he's not the kind of guy who's gonna be doing like really intense complicated plotting, but he's gonna be like, this is the right thing to do, and go do it. Which,
yeah, I think also he's this unconventional guy, and so as soon as he finds out that, like, you know, Tatty Boy was fake and Lymond was like messing with the society, he's like, this is great. He doesn't care who he was spying for, he just likes that he was breaking the social rules.
yeah,
I also
and
love,
he's like a big sculptor guy, and like, it just, I don't know, I just like him.
I also love that he doesn't seem at all put out by the fact that his brother is dead. Like,
I mean, he's wearing like a memorial, like he's got his brother's doublet is like he's wearing it as, I think they called it a sad rag or something. And so there is a little bit, I think, of melancholy about that, but
I assume that there's been some time now, probably like a few weeks at least in between, but still.
yeah.
I do think there is that hint of mourning. It says, in the fallen giant and the vulture were all that the sculptor would ever say of the sword stroke with which Robin Stewart had killed his brother. Presumably the vulture being Stewart and the fallen giant being his brother. We got the sense when we were in Bryce's point of view that he was kind of impatient with his brother, but because Michelle kept sending like people to visit him that he didn't want to see. But the fact that Michelle kept sending in people, I think probably indicates that Michelle thought higher of Bryce than Bryce thought of Michelle.
Yeah. Like, I have a feeling that Michelle's concept of Bryce was better than he was.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. And Michelle's a good guy, so I think he is mourning his brother, but you know, we only get a little bit of it. So then Lymond, having reappeared, revealed who he is. This is an interesting thing. You know, he tells Michelle about Robin Stewart's plot, and it says his own hurt, which again is probably you know, hurt for having lost his brother to Robin. His own hurt exploded into fury against Robin Stewart's corrupt master. Lymond nursed it delicately and introduced the name of Antonius Beck. Lymond is manipulative. This is another little puppet master thing here. It's not wrong. He's doing all this for the greater good, but he is setting up Harrison to be angry at Daubeny and to help him catch Beck.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right.
It is interesting that Michelle doesn't seem to have any qualms about like dealing with women differently from men, which is because he basically says, go after Una. And when Lymond says that, he says, I would go and make sure of your witness. In other words, go deal with this person. And Lymond says, with the bloody great chisel. At the tone, the sculptor's light lashes flickered. A woman, is it? Why get dainty over that? The alchemy's different, but the claws are the same. So he's like, don't get all weird because she's a woman. Just deal with her.
Well, and here Lymond says, not my property. The alchemy, at least. I've had a taste of the claws. So maybe that's what the quote in the beginning was kind of about. Because he's talking about her as property, and like he can't go use the chisel because she doesn't belong to him.
Belong to him?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
We also get the reveal that Lymond already believes that Daubeny is going to wriggle out of Robin Stewart's accusations, which is why he's trying to get this other proof to back it up.
Yeah. And Michelle gives a little bit of like ominous foreshadowing there. He's like, God, I'm glad I'm not your brother. If they find out you're Tatty Boy and Daubany's still in favor, then...
And how happy we shall be.
Yeah, to the confession of Beck. And so he's kind of like, Lymond's kind of saying like, if you don't follow through with this,
I'm gonna die.
Disaster is going to ensue. And yeah, so there's this sort of Damocles kind of hanging over everything.
And I mean, very, very typical of Lymond to have ended up in a situation where it is himself on the line. He always puts himself at risk. There's also this line in here. He's like, man, I wouldn't have known you. And then Lymond says, sinned against my brother, the ass, which I looked up, and it's like a quote from St. Francis of Assisi, and it's not about your brother, it's about damaging your own body. Which makes sense because he sure did damage his own body. Okay.
Interesting.
So then
cuts off Michelle several times in this section. Like every time Michelle starts talking, not every time, but Lymond will just like finish his sentence for him. Like it seems he's kind of impatient with this meeting. He's like, I've got other things to do, so let's get on with it.
Or maybe he's like maybe it's part of his leading him along. Or maybe it's just this Michelle is such a jovial person that they're like bantering quickly.
Keep him on track, yeah.
Yeah. So then we get Richard. Yay, Richard. I always love Richard in this book. Not in every book, but in this book. So Lymond arranges to meet with Richard in an inn called the Little God of Love, which Richard seems to find reassuring in its felicity, which is cute. Chooses to meet his brother in a place that kind of reassures him that he still loves him. And so then we have this whole kind of bit of recap in Richard's mind of stuff that's just happened, which is that mainly it's that Cormac arrived and Lymond and him had a confrontation. So we get our first actual description of Cormac, a burly man of great height with filbert cheeks, black brows, and a round calyx of satin black hair trimmed just above. And he is greatly given to fighting. What a jerk. Nobody likes Cormac. All right. And then Lymond has a confrontation with him where like Cormac is this guy that just kind of keeps going around and being like, you know, the English in Ireland is terrible and we need to kill them all, kind of. And Lymond gets into a little like snarky battle with him where he says, what for would I be wanting Cormac O'Connor any time of my life, or any possession of Cormac O'Connor's, or any ambition of Cormac O'Connor's, or anything which he thinks he has and does not have at all, which is of course about Una.
Yeah. And it was it's just such a nice burn.
So Cormac just thinks Lymond is this little weakling. I know Lymond, you know, obviously thinks Cormac is a brute.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that confrontation between the two of them?
I mean, I wonder if, because one of the things that we've been saying, or that people have been saying about Lymond this entire book, Una and Lymond, and others, is just that he's like not stepping up to the responsibilities that he should as a leader. And Cormac O'Connor seems to be his primary rival. So I sort of wonder if personal animosity towards Cormac O'Connor might be the impetus to get him to step up and do something. I don't know. Like, but I wonder if this like continues and they continue to have this just tension and friction between them that
because Lymond is such a thoughtful guy, and the guy that is stepping up is a totally unthoughtful, just violent guy. So maybe that'll motivate Lymond to use power to counter Cormac.
Exactly. Like maybe he'll see, okay, the value of me actually doing something is clear. So
the other bit I thought was interesting in this is we're in Richard's thoughts, and he's got some information about Lymond, but he hasn't actually met him yet. And basically none of the information he's got indicates that Lymond is either chastened or repentant. So I guess he was hoping maybe that Lymond would be chastened or repentant a bit, but it doesn't seem like he has super strong feelings either way. He shows up just with mild curiosity and no more. then Francis arrives. And I like, because we're in Richard's point of view, he's thinking of him as Francis, his little brother. Exactly on time, because her vassal is, of course, meticulous and perfect, unlike Tatty Boy. And he, he first of all, he says, "You incredible liar, you promised to be out of the country by Lent." And Lymond says, "Always accepting a damnum fatale." I had a damnum fatale, which is a legal term referring to an act of God, something that you can't be held liable for. Which is true, actually. So then they have this cute little scene where they catch up. And there's a couple of bits in here I thought were interesting. One is that Lymond, as her vassal, has recently acquired a direct gaze, which his brother found vaguely disquieting, which is another reference to her vassal making people uncomfortable. It even makes Richard uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm curious. I underlined this too, and I was curious. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. I was wondering if could it be Lymond is having a response to having spent so much time with an indirect gaze, like having to be Tatty Boy and having to be, so not that he's not always manipulative, but that Tatty Boy was like manipulative in a way that Lymond didn't enjoy, especially towards the end, and that he was so indirect and like always hiding everything, and so now he gets the chance to be like this precise, and so he's just like looking people. I wonder if it's something like if something Lymond's doing in response to having been Tatty Boy, that now he gets to be this opposite, because like you said, it's like this opposite character that
No, I actually think that there's definitely something in that, and I think that Vervassal, as a reaction to Tatty Boy, is Lymond sort of taking it too far in the other direction and starting to repress things in himself that were the good things in Tatty Boy, which is maybe why Vervassal makes people uncomfortable. It's like half a person, and it's this hyper extreme version of the analytical side.
So the pendulum just swung, like Tatty Boy was the pendulum swinging way too far this way, and Vervassal is the pendulum swinging way too far that way.
Right. Yeah. And it's like this recurring theme in this book that Lymond doesn't know who he is or what to do with his life, and he's putting on all these masks, and he's just not figured it out yet.
It makes sense. I mean, if he's had this mission for so long to clear his name and be reconciled with his family, and like that was his like sole goal for a while. Like we don't know exactly how long, but like 5 years.
Like 5 years.
Yeah, that was his goal, and he was sort of like arrow focused on that and only that. And then he got it, and now what do you do? And so all the stuff he's been pushing back and all the stuff he hasn't been dealing with, like it's all coming forward. And
well, and then here we have the big, this is kind of the, kind of the resolution of the Lymond is no longer the heir to Coulter anymore, which despite him, so he sort of had pretended that he wasn't bothered by it, but I think quite clearly he was, especially because it keeps coming up in the subtext. Oh yeah, he didn't look bothered, but of course he was bothered. There's this lovely, lovely, lovely scene where he gives Richard a gift for Kevin, his newborn son. And it's kind of saying
Richard was gonna name Francis.
Oh, we're gonna talk about that next, but let's talk about the gift first. So he gives him this gift, which is like saying he's accepted that he's no longer the heir. He loves his nephew, he loves his brother, he's welcoming him into the family. He's showing this love, but I think it's this graciousness of accepting what he's lost. And it made me think about, losing mid-culture is not just about losing power and identity, which is how we talked about it before, but it's actually losing the home he grew up with and the possibility of spending his future in that home.
Yeah. I'm also super intrigued with the specificity of this gift, and like the fact that she describes it like so particularly, and it's really beautiful, and and it's small. Like it's not he doesn't gift him with a piece of land or, you know, something like that. He gives him with an object, which makes me wonder if that object is going to return later. Like if there's going to be something about this particular rose and tree and thing that's going to, I don't know. But it did seem very specific and portable. It's very specific and it's very portable, which I'm like,
So we'll be seeing a lot of it, probably.
Maybe? Like, I just feel like it should come up again, whatever it is. Also,
just remember it.
I love that his name is Kevin.
Yeah, so let's talk about the naming. Why did Sibylla say no to Francis and no to Gavin? And oh my God, Richard wanted to name it Francis.
I love that. Also, I do not think of Kevin as a name that happens in the 1500s.
Apparently it is. It's an Irish name.
I know. To me, Kevin is like the kid who stole my lunchbox in the 80s. You know?
Yeah.
Yep. Gavin was their father's name, correct?
Right.
Yeah, so I can see why it's a no to Gavin, because there's bad memories there, at least for Lymond. So,
I wonder if Sibylla, I'm totally putting thoughts in her head. Like, I have no evidence for this whatsoever. But I wonder if Sibylla felt like if he named his son Francis, that Lymond would feel tied and responsible to the boy even more than he would, like that it would create a restraint on Lymond that he perhaps, like Sibylla thought, is too much to name him. Like, I think her intention in saying no, don't name him Francis, was to benefit Francis. Like, I don't think she said that to take something away from Francis. So there had to have been some sort of negative consequence that she could foresee if the baby was named Francis. So I wonder if it was her trying to protect Francis from feeling so responsible for the baby. Maybe, I don't know.
It could also be uncomfortable to be usurped by someone with the same name as you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And plus, Francis is already such a character. Like,
we don't need two Francises.
Why would you want two Francises? I mean, I know there's no sign at all that Kevin is going to be anything like Francis, but like, you know.
Yeah, but it has to be something big, because you can imagine that if Richard names his oldest son and heir after his brother, like that's a huge honor, and it's a huge message to Francis of respect and love and inclusion and all of that. So for Sibylla to say, no, don't do that, like that's pretty big. So
keep it in mind. Okay. So we also have a little bit of plotty stuff that they discuss. So Lymond fills in that Martine found out about Beck. Harrison's going to trace him and make him confess. And Lymond basically has a backup plan, which I guess is Una. He says, I shall deal with her myself.
Also, by the way, I really loved the little dig that Lymond gave at Richard about the jeweler. Like,
oh, what's the dig? Where?
Oh my gosh, it was so funny. On 355, so he says he's giving the gift she describes the rose and the black jet of the rose and blah, blah, blah. And then Lymond says, I hope you like it. Send him to me when he's 18 and needs money, and I shall direct him to a man called Gautier who will give him a good price for it. Which I totally think is him just teasing Richard about the wild goose chase that he went on with the jeweler. I think it's just a brotherly moment of, you know, ha, because obviously he's not serious. Like, the kid's gonna have money. So
yeah.
But I think it was just him teasing his brother about that.
Do you remember who Gautier is, by the way?
Isn't he that guy that Sibylla, the glove guy?
No, he's the guy that owns the Dame de Dutance's house. The usurer on the ground floor with the wheelbarrow.
Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, true. So then it's not a dig about the same. Never mind. It's not a dig about the same thing. But I think it is a joke. Like, he's just.
Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. I'm not sure.
He wouldn't want him to sell it to a user. So yeah.
What was that, Philippe?
It's got this whole scene. They're very playful with each other. Because I wonder, has Richard seen him since the accident at the Minute Maid tour Disney?
No.
So even in the interim where we didn't get a lot, where suddenly he shows up in England with Tom Erskine.
Yeah, this is the first time Richard's seen him since then.
Okay.
He's heard from Lymond, so he knows that he's, functional again. But yeah, this is the first meeting. Also, we have basically Richard's now going to leave because Richard has a newborn baby at home that he really, really misses. This is his firstborn child. He wants to go home. So he's going to leave.
Probably like 4 months, maybe.
And then we end this scene with Lymond playing a game of strip dice.
Of course. Perfectly sober. He's perfectly sober.
Perfectly sober, which is like this is like a great little
playful.
Yeah, it's like a Tatty Boy and a Vervassel kind of merge here. He's sober, but he's still playing strip dice.
Strip dice.
Like he invented the game on the spot.
Like, are they playing craps? Is that that's what's going on? Some sort of, yeah.
Wow. Some game that the people at the inn, who own the inn, had never seen before, and were debating whether to like call in the watch.
Right.
Oh my God, Francis Crawford would be so much fun to hang out with. He would drive you nuts, but you would have so much fun.
You'd have to go home and like sleep.
You weren't being manipulated though.
True, yeah. You may end up hating him, but also you'd have a good time.
Yeah.
And then we end on Richard Crawford contemplating this gift, so we can get the importance of this gift and the weight of how much it means to Richard, and this kind of reminder that these brothers love each other so much, which is why they had the power to hurt each other so much in the previous book. Oh. All right, any other comments on chapter 1 before we move on? All right, so 2, I don't know exactly how to say it, but I think it's Ange, Boar's Head, and Apple.
Quote was slightly ominous in light of our current situation.
I know, I wrote the same thing.
Right.
This sounds familiar.
I was like, ouch, this is not good.
One of you guys want to read it? Philippe, you want to read it?
Sure. There are 3 periods at which the world dies. The period of a plague, cough, cough, of a general war, of the dissolution of verbal contracts. In like manner is fixed the contract by word of mouth, as Adam was condemned for his red fraud. All the world died for 1 apple.
What do you think this quote is in here?
So the dissolution of verbal contracts in like manner is fixed the contract by word of mouth, as Adam was condemned for his red fraud. So I was thinking that it referred to the contract between Lymond and Robin, that Lymond dissolves the contract and sort of betrays Robin.
I thought the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Will that lead to all the world dying?
Probably not. But
Probably not.
Oh, well, the plague that is happening right now.
we've got all this. I mean, we haven't
know.
had the massive war yet.
Well,
anyway.
Back to Lymond and not reality for a second.
Back to the distraction from reality. So we start out with these rich French douchebags that we remember before. It's Condé and Dongan, his brother. And they are making fun of the Scots. They heard that another Scot is coming, meaning Vervassel, and they're like doing this grotesque Scottish accent, making fun of the Scottish people that are in France. Which kind of, in addition to reminding us that they are kind of jerks, also is indicative of the tension between France and Scotland. Even though they're allies and there's a whole bunch of French in Scotland, Scottish aren't super happy about having all this French in there. The French aren't super happy about spending all this money on Scotland. So this is not necessarily an alliance. Well, looking historically back, we can say for sure it's not necessarily an alliance that's going to last. And meanwhile, Cormac is also in this place, like eavesdropping on them. They're playing backgammon, and he's sitting near them. And so then he like bursts in and does his typical like warmongering bullshit.
It's very interesting that Dongan is already treating Cormac like his new paramour. Like,
Not Cormac. Wait, what? No. Where? How? Is he?
well, it was. I thought he was the black-haired person he was like petting his shoulder and like touching his hand. Isn't that Cormac, or did I read that wrong?
I don't know if he's treating him as a new paramour, if he's just being Dongan and he's kind of like that with everybody.
I think it's
But also,
like touchy.
but I do. So Cormac is there trying to get France's help to fight the English in Ireland. So Cormac is, even though he doesn't like them, it says he doesn't like them, but he's trying to hide it because he needs them as allies. So it says his narrow eyes, their contempt undisguised for a moment, ranged over the two careless faces, then his voice flattened with effort. So he's like kind of trying to make nice with them, but he really can't stand them.
Also, he's touching Condé, not, so it says the big man laying a broad hand on Jean de Bourbon's satin shoulder. There's no finer gentleman than Irish blah blah than yourself if you had, etc., etc. So I think Cormac is trying to suck up to the French.
He's trying to suck up to them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There is no finer gentleman on Irish soil or under it than the like of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think he asked for a loan. I don't really understand this. They think he's asking them for a loan, but I don't know if he means it. It's a really weird thing to do.
The hair, yeah.
But he definitely, like, he's in France to get stuff from France to help Ireland. So maybe this is just like a small scale metaphor for that, with him asking them for money. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they're gossiping about Francis Crawford, which is fun. So Condé has already heard, well, they've already heard about Lymond's arrival. And apparently Deschamaux's secretary had written a note under the report he sent recently describing Lymond as a beauty but frigid, which we shall keep in mind. And then Cormac goes off about Lymond and calls him a smooth-skinned bag of curds brought up by an Edinburgh dominie and turned silly on a cup of pear juice. And then later we find out that Lymond has eavesdropped on this whole thing.
Yes. Which was lovely.
Yes.
Also, is the pear juice thing, is that referencing something we should know? Is there some sort of like social, I don't know, thing about pear juice that I don't know?
Or maybe an Irish mythology thing about pear juice.
I feel like it's referencing something that is insulting. Like it's insulting something, but I just don't get the reference. Pear juice sounds lovely.
Yeah.
That seems
fermented nice. Pear juice, clearly.
Cider.
Pear cider. That sounds nice.
So this scene's interestingly set up because we then like jump back in time. So Lymond comes out and meets them, and then we go back inside with Lymond and the constable, and then come out again through that perspective. So then we pick this part up. But it is notable that as Lymond appears, he's an elegant gentleman. He smiles at Dongan, and Dongan, to his own delight, blushed. So he's a new person, but they're still flirting.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So now we kind of jump back in time, and we are with Francis Crawford, who's talking to the Constable of France. And so this is an amazing line at the top of 359 that I like. Fate and Francis Crawford, in wary collaboration, had arranged that the re-entry of Tatty Boy Ballot should take place in 2 steps. Which, in addition to being an amazing line, is that recurring theme of fate that has been happening in this book, with all the sort of fated things that took him to the Dame de Dutance, and then also the fact that it was the game of tarot that saved him in the last book. This idea of fate as a wary ally. And we get this, I also just like this description of the mood of France at this time of year. It was approaching the time when the well-fed, well-rested, and well-exercised in the kingdom with ambitions to satisfy began looking for trouble, and old men turned up antagonisms like truffles and dressed them in valorous tinsel to lure on the brash.
Yeah. I mean, it just reminded me of how, like, historically, you go to war in summer. Like, you don't fight in winter, you fight in summer because there's food, basically. and it's like, okay, it's spring, we've passed Easter, it's spring, now the tension's going to ratchet up, and, you know, whether or not they're explicitly going to gather an army and go to marching on somewhere is not, I think, the point. But the point is like, this is the time when you do that, and who's gonna break.
And that they're looking for reasons to fight, right? Turned up old antagonisms like truffles. They're searching out these things to dig up and fight about, and then dress up in valorous tinsel to get everyone behind them to go battle. There's no real reason to have war. It's just a lot of crap.
Yeah, and it's just like trading land back and forth through the years, and it just reminds me today of like rich people who have a lot of money. It's just a way to keep score. Like it's not about money. It's not about purchasing power. It's about I'm higher up in the hierarchy than the other person. And it's like war was like that. It's like, it's not about this particular thing, like this insult or this parcel of land that's important. It's about, did I win or not? You know, and
yeah, and dressing it up in valorous tinsel, so getting all these people to believe in this like patriotic great motive when it's just fake.
Really, it's just powerful people trying to keep score. And
yeah, and the people that are manipulated into fighting are just taken advantage of.
Yeah, the ones who suffer.
Yeah,
still true today.
So we then get the scene with Lymond and the constable, where basically he brings the constable dispatches from Deschamaux. There's like an official one, and then there's one for the constable's eyes only, which accuses Daubeny and Lennox. And we find out that Robin Stewart has already accused Daubeny, and the king already heard it. And of course, it's not going to stick. Without proof, Daubeny is untouchable. And so the point of this conversation is Lymond talks to the constable and gets the constable to agree that if Lymond does get proof, the constable will help with going after Daubeny once there is proof.
Which, interestingly, I thought it was a nice implication too, that the constable, like, he's not going to do it necessarily for altruistic reasons. It's because all the people around the king, like, if they can bring someone down, it benefits them. But they can't even try to bring someone down unless they're guaranteed that they'll succeed, because the king will, you never know how the king is gonna. It's just so capricious, like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely not about the greater good. It's like in the particular political struggles and battles of all these people trying to push themselves up a little bit, here's someone you can push down. But Lymond has to play with cards that he's dealt. This is how this world works. Okay, so then Lymond, meanwhile, he's been having this negotiation with the constable, but he also has been eavesdropping on this conversation that we were in earlier between Conde Dongan and Cormac. So he heard what Cormac said about him. And then we get this hilarious little scene. First of all, throughout the introductions, Dongan's gaze did not leave him, moving slowly over the burnished head, the indolent face, the beguiling limbs. And we get just several like references through this section that Lymond in his tatty boy guise is ridiculously hot. Like, he's super attractive, which is just fun. And he teases. He's definitely kind of teasing Dongan. I think playfully.
In his vervassal guise, he's ridiculously hot.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is again like, it's the opposite of tatty boy, right?
Right.
Tatty boy was so unattractive, supposedly.
Right.
Vervassal is gorgeous.
He's so sparkling and shining and like glittering and all those things.
Yep. So then Lymond says to O'Connor, Mr. O'Cluricon, you said, and then the constable corrects it as Mr. O'Connor. So the Clurican is like an Irish mythology fairy who gets drunk in gentlemen's cellars, and he says on pear juice, perhaps, meaning, you called me this insult, so now I'm going to call you a mythological fairy that gets drunk on pear juice, which of course is going to offend this big burly war-mongering, probably homophobic guy to be called a fairy. Yeah. So Lymond is just messing with him.
Yeah.
Just as a quick aside.
Obviously, oh wait, what?
I was just going to say there's a really good character named Clurican in Neil Gaiman's Sandman. So I knew immediately what they were talking about. For once I knew what it was.
So I love this little bit. There was a light in Diangon's lustrous eyes, a familiar light, a light which the Prince of Condé noticed and understood. So he knows his brother is like hot for this guy. And then what does Jean de Beaumont, what does he say there?
He says, a beauty, but not frigid at all.
I'm curious as to which characters recognize that Vervassal Lymond is actually Tatty Boy. Like, which ones figure it out and who doesn't? Obviously, Michel doesn't right away, but when he looks again, he sees it almost immediately. So it can't be that much of a difference between the two characters. Like, his face is still going to be the same. You know what I mean?
But it could be like, Michel doesn't notice until Lymond says, look again. Like, Lymond tells him there's something you're missing, pay attention, which makes me feel like anyone who's just casually looking at him is not going to notice. It's Clark Kent and Superman. Like,
I know, but that was always confusing to me as well. But
I know,
like,
right?
You would think D'Angen would notice because of how much time he spent with Tatty Boy. And I would think that the Constable Montmorency would notice too, because he's a pretty shrewd fellow.
Yeah, but I think D'Angen is not that deep. So he's
no.
Not, I think he's like, ooh, hot guy.
Here's a trade for me.
Yeah, and the Constable, you know, I just feel like Lymond, you know, it's sort of like, okay, this is going to be an obscure reference to anyone who's watching, but it's sort of like the way that people can recognize us in Sleep No More when we're masked because of our posture, and like it's immediately obvious who people are even with your face masked because of the way you stand and the way you walk. So if Lymond, I think the opposite is also true. If Lymond is moving differently and walking differently and standing differently and his posture is different and he's able to disguise all of those cues, then people aren't going to notice immediately, you know?
Yeah. So with the Constable, it flat out says, nothing in the well-anointed precision before him recalled a battered figure on the roadside in Rouen.
Yeah,
so
he's just got a completely different demeanor.
I thought for sure that he would pick up on it, but
yeah. I mean, it's that scene, you know, like we always discount the Clark Kent Superman thing, but if you watch the first Christopher Reeve Superman movie, there's a moment that's absolutely brilliant where he's on the balcony with Lois Lane and at her apartment, and he's about to confess that he's Superman, and he stands up and his posture completely changes and he takes off his glasses and he's a totally different person. And then Lois interrupts him and he just goes, oh, like, and he puts his glasses back on and he goes back into this kind of slumped down Clark Kent. And it's really noticeable, the difference. And so even though you still have that, really, you don't pick up on, like, there's still a little bit of like, seriously, nobody gets it, but you can kind of see why, because Christopher Reeves does such a great job of that switch.
Yeah. And this is also so different because his hair is a different color, his skin is lighter, his clothes are completely different. He was overweight, now he's super skinny. Like, everything is different.
Yeah.
His voice is different because he's speaking without the Irish accent now. Just, yeah, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, all these people are so shallow.
He was dyeing his skin earlier as well, so
yeah,
that
a lot of cues.
Okay, so after that scene, Lymond meets the king and discusses Deschamaux's report. And like, again, this description, out to every question, the herald's response was detached, graceful, and proper. So opposite of Tatty Boy, the king presumably does not pick up anything either. And then we have this great moment that I want to talk about in depth, where we are in Lymond's point of view as he's re-entering France. So how about I read it and then I ask you guys for what you think is going on?
Sure.
Okay. For his main emotion, approaching his friends, the Scottish court, all those knowledgeable eyes which knew him for the former Tatty Boy Bala, was one of anger, sheer helpless anger, because prinked like a cake baker at a ball, he had condemned himself to a tawdry transformation, which would label him juvenile, would label him apostate, as surely as the Oleumrose silk suits and shaved chin had done. Riding then across the North Bridge into the castle of Angers, Lymond addressed his absent friends bitterly under his breath. Don't show your satisfaction too much. Don't smile. Don't signal your congratulations. Or by God, ladies and gentlemen, you shall have Tatty Boy Ballad back for life. What is going on there?
I see it. So this struck me a little bit as someone young. Like this whole section struck me as like a teenager or a younger person's attitude, because he is, first of all, he's mad, and I think it's a combination of anger at himself and anger at the people that he's like, it's hard to explain, but it just reminds me of like a 17-year-old coming in and be like, don't you do this to me? You know, like just because I had to do this, and just because we're gonna, like, I'm back at the other person. If you say one word, if you mock me at all, I'm gonna be the thing you don't like, you know, and I'm gonna be that forever, you know. And it just reminds me of like someone, I don't know if I can articulate it. It's like someone who had some sort of bad behavior, and they were kind of forced or made to see the light into growing up and becoming more mature, but they're like, if anybody says anything, I'm gonna go back to my rebellious self, you know, so just don't comment on it. And you can, like, that, I felt like that, you know. It's like,
yeah, it's really hard for me to articulate why this resonated so much with me, but it really, really does. And one thing it makes me think of, which is, this is not a fully thought out thought, but just bear with me. I was a goth kid, and I was a goth kid as a specific reaction against a society that's, you know, really conformist and really capitalist. And the whole point of your life is just to sell yourself into capitalist society and serve it and have it use you up. And I was a goth kid to say there's more to life than this. There's art, and there's human connection, and there's just stuff that has nothing to do with this fake bullshit capitalism that we have to like sell ourselves to. And then there's this sort of like, if you stop being a goth kid, which most of us eventually do, I never like officially did, I just stopped bothering so much makeup all the time, but then people think you were repudiating what you believed before, and that now you embrace selling your soul to capitalism. And I don't want people to assume that.
right.
Mhm.
And it's obviously, he's not in the same kind of capitalist world, but he's in a world where you have to sell yourself to survive. It's very similar.
Yeah. And it's like, he knows that the Tatty Boy persona was not healthy. Like, that's clear. Like, he knows that he was going down a road that was leading to disaster. Like, the end of the whole Tatty Boy situation was super bad. Like, that's not a mystery to Lymond. And yet at the same time, yeah, I think you're right. It's like, if you say anything, talking to like the Scots, like, if you bring this up, if you say anything, if you make a joke about it,
If you congratulate me on it.
yeah, if you congratulate me on it, like, we're going back, you know. And that, it's, in some ways, I do think it's like a young response, but at the same time, it's understandable. Like, nobody wants to be mocked. Nobody wants to be treated as a kid, because he talks about how, I think this would label him juvenile is a huge part of this. Like, that he'll get labeled a kid is somehow causing this massive emotional reaction, which just makes me go like, how old is he? What? Yeah.
Philippe, do you have any thoughts on what this means? Why he's thinking this way?
I don't always think about these things as deeply as the both of you do, as I'm sure everyone has noticed, but I think it's his way of saying, all right, I did the Tatty Boy thing. Let's move on. Let's not talk about it. Like, I'm here to accomplish something different in a different way. So like, he's putting like the sort of end to it. He's like, let's not go back there, or else you're going to see me revert to that, and none of us wants that to happen.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's, to use Laura's goth example, which I think that's a really interesting way to think about it, is sort of like if someone said to you, oh, I'm so glad you've given that up. You're so much more mature and adult now that you've given up those,
I'd be like, fuck you!
Right, exactly. It's like, now that you've given up those crazy notions of your childhood and that immature thing that you used to do. And it would, the response would be like, F you, I'm going back to it, and that's a completely understandable response to that.
Yeah.
So I guess we have time, so I'll do this. So I love these. There's these old Lymond Yahoo discussion groups that moved to groups.io, and they're a wonderful resource if you're trying to figure out what a line means or read what other people think about it. Because if you search the archives for a particular phrase, you'll get all the discussions going back 20 years about it.
Wow.
And so I Googled this, or not Googled, I searched this one in the groups, and I found this wonderful commentary about it that I actually wanted to read an excerpt from, and then I'll link to it in the YouTube description so people can go read it. You have to sign up for the group, but I think anyone can. So I'm just going to read this person's interpretation of this because I thought it was so well said and really interesting. So bear with me. This is from Alexis Volkerts on the Game of Kings groups.io, which used to be the Yahoo group. And she wrote, by denying the value of Francis as Tatty Boy, you deny the crux of the story and some essential truths about Francis. As Tatty Boy, it is the emotional, sensitive, creative side that is dominating and the intellect that is less dominant. Tatty Boy grants him the freedom that allows his creativity to flourish. He also tells us this in his discussions about the nature of creativity. At no other time is Lymond depicted as being so freely creative, musically, poetically, playfully, or as effervescent and funny as when he is Tatty Boy. Granted, he overdid it as Tatty Boy. Overdoing it was reflective of his immaturity and youth, but the essential characteristics of Tatty Boy, the joyous creativity, the quick and inventive mind, the vital fire of life, the freedom to experiment and improvise, the lack of concern about superficial appearances, the respect for talent over all other qualities, the acting and playing with roles, the exuberant sexuality, these are a true reflection of who Francis Crawford is. It is Vervassel, the perfect ice king, who is the act. Because the role of Tatty Boy meant something to Lymond, it had a value as it reflected a part of him he didn't want to deny. But here he's washed and polished and finely dressed and playing the courtier, formed by his role and the expectations of the court rather than by his own spirit and inclination. To him, this feels as if he is denying everything that was real, valuable, and worthy in Tatty Boy, and by extension, those same qualities Lymond valued in himself.
Yeah. I like that.
Very well said.
I really like that.
Yeah.
And I also think, my addition to that would be it's not just about the creativity, but it's about the being his own man and shaping his own fate, which is so important to him. The independence is so important to him, not being the tool of the Queen Dowager. And he hates to be seen as having become her tool and given up his independence and freedom of thought. All right, ready to move on?
Sure.
So I will just mention here, and I'm going to bring this up again later, and we can talk more then, but he says this bitterly. This is one of two times that the word bitter in relation to Lymond comes up. And I want to come back to it because that's also a motif with Una and Robin and this whole idea that they represent sides of himself if he were to go too far in one direction. So we have Robin's trial. It goes very quickly because there was never a chance that it was going to result in Daubeny being caught, just because Robin Stewart says so. No one believes him, and Robin gets sentenced to death, and to some kind of horrible death that we find more about later.
Yeah.
So then they decide to send him into the bear baiting. So we get this bear baiting scene because we haven't seen enough animals, or boar baiting rather. We haven't seen enough animals horribly mutilated and killed yet. So let's have some more.
Yeah.
So this is like the whole court is there. So this is another like re-entry of Lymond. where we get people's reactions to him. So George Douglas is the one that cracks me up because he's like looking at him and like making faces at Margaret, like, what the hell?
Yeah. It's like, clearly nobody told George Douglas that.
Yeah. A reeling astonishment laced with malice.
Yeah. And I'm super curious about what happened when Lymond met with the Dowager Queen, which we don't know as of yet. So
interesting, yes.
We can guess.
Actually, as to what happens next.
Exactly.
Post-it tore my book. I'm going to tape it together before I lose it. All right.
That's book abuse.
How dare it. All right, so we also get some.
Not the best. Like,
what?
I really want hardback copies that I can sort of prize, because like these are not the best quality in terms of.
These are better than the other ones though. All of my like the vintage, the previous version, they all just fallen apart.
I want hardback ones. Yeah.
Okay, so we get this great description of Lymond, quote, looking like ice. And Margaret is looking at him and she thinks, even 2 years ago, he had not looked like that. Which I think is not just that he looks like ice, but again, that he is just ridiculously super hot. So then we get this moment between Daubeny and Lymond where they catch each other's eyes and glare at each other and convey not an ultimatum, but a judgment. I know who you are, you know who I am.
Yeah, and I think there's this also nice nod to like why Una is involved in all the, like it's the much nearer the front, the man O'Connor, and next to O'Connor was John Stewart, Lord Daubeny. So like we get an explicit connection. Not that we didn't know, but that clearly Una is connected to Daubeny through O'Connor, and there's just the public acknowledgement.
So then we have George Douglas makes his way over to Vervassel. His like weird obsessed curiosity about like curiosity, malice, but like intrigue. Like he wants him, he wants to use him. He also has malice against him. And it's this great description. For a moment, he studied the downcast lashes and the imprint of well-bred deference held evidently without effort on that harlequin face. There's definitely effort there. He's faking the deference. And then we get another reference to how Robin's going to die, his official disemboweling. Oh, poor Robin. And this kind of great, just this understanding of how the world works from Dunnett, where she describes how the people are cheering for Robin to come out and fight the boar. And they did not much care what he had done if it made good gossip and good burning. She gets psychology so well, human psychology.
I mean, I feel like this is it's just bred in circuses, you know? It's just that humanity throughout time just wants to be fed and entertained, and the cruelty of the entertainment doesn't matter. And
yeah, but also like they're cheering for the death of Robin, and they really don't care. It's just the like madness of the crowd in a way. But then Robin actually holds his own and fights really well, and has this opportunity to salvage a little bit of his pride and gets the crowd a bit on his side. And then of course it gets ruined by Lymond. Okay.
And that line where it's on 368 where it says it's after he's been fighting the boar, and it says the sword split in the grass told of something stoical and persevering which had always been there but seldom drawn out in other than low causes and grumbling. So like there was this core to Robin that could have been something good, and wasn't.
There's something very sad there.
Yeah.
And so then we have this thing by the Queen Dowager, which is pretty extreme. So she's definitely planning it the whole time, because Lymond had been sitting by George Douglas, and she calls him over. He moves and sits by her. Notable again.
Right.
Yeah, in the front. And he's sitting by her, distracting the attention of several nearby ladies. Because again, he's so hot that everyone around him is just like, oh my God, he's so hot. But Stewart fights well. He actually it probably would have ended, but of course Daubeny eggs it on because it would be beneficial for him for Stewart to die. So then, as Stewart is fighting the boar and probably going to win, the Queen Dowager drops her scarf into the arena and tells Lymond to go get it for her. Why does she do that?
I was trying to figure that out, and I couldn't figure if it was some sort of retaliation on sort of the way he left as Tatty Boy Bala, or if she's taking the opportunity to have him interfere with whatever's happening to Robin Stewart. Like maybe she wants to make sure Robin Stewart lives. So even though Robin Stewart is winning, she's like, well, if Lymond is down there, he will save Robin Stewart's life. I don't know. Maybe it's just her way of introducing her vassal into the French court, because not many of the people have met him yet. So like she knows if Lymond gets involved in it, he's going to make a big show of it, and people are going to be talking about him.
Yeah, I feel like it has something to do with the conversation that they had that we don't know the content of. So Lymond was in some sort of meeting with the Dowager Queen before this, and we as the reader are not part of that scene, so we don't know what happened in the conversation. And I kind of wonder if this is the Dowager Queen forcing Lymond to do something that he doesn't want to do. And so like, I feel like there's something in that conversation that she wanted, like he didn't want to do something that this very dramatic public scene forces him to do, and she made him do it as a result of that conversation.
And we already know from the other conversation we heard between them that she wants him to work for her, and he consistently refuses to do it. So in a way, she's exercising her power over him here, getting him to do something for her. I think she also sets it up to be able to have a defense if he gets caught, to say, well, clearly I don't care about his life. He's not my spy. Look, I sent him in with that boar.
Yeah.
How do you think he, sorry?
A boar who was already bloodied and almost done for.
Yeah.
How do you think he was ever in any danger?
No.
How do you think he feels about this?
He's angry. I would be
annoyed. Yeah.
We already know he doesn't like being used by people, especially not people in power like the Queen, and she's totally exerting her force over him in this. Like, it's blatantly obvious that that scarf dropped there on purpose and that she led him to do it. So,
I mean, there's this lovely interaction between him and the Dowager where it says, for an interminable moment, Lymond did not move. You know, and it says the latter brusque had used to enter the ditch lay at his feet. Such an order, capricious and intolerable as it might be, was royal. It was a command performance of chivalry, and to disobey it in public was something no man there would have done. After waiting just long enough, the herald turned and bowed, meeting the cool gaze under his lifted brows. Mary of Guise smiled. Then he swung over it. So it's like they had this interaction where he's like, really? And he waits as absolutely long as possible as he can, and then he turns and looks at her and she smiles and she's like, you know you have to. And so then he does it. But yeah,
I don't think it's going to work out in her favor in the long run if she wants him to be loyal to her.
She's not going about it in the right way. Like, she's forcing him instead of convincing him.
So he jumps in there, he fights the boar. We have this great image of, he got to his feet like a cat. So again, he keeps getting compared to a cat, and his beautiful gold glittery tabard is covered in boar's blood now. He kills the boar, and then we have Robin Stewart's perspective as Robin faced his demon, meaning Lymond, and this gorgeous image of the flowers that people are throwing into the arena, hitting Lymond and sticking to the bloody tabard.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lymond picks up the sword, he spears one of the flowers and like takes it, lifts it over, gives it to Robin. And of course, Robin doesn't understand what he's doing and like tries to attack him, and then Lymond knocks him over, which I interpret as Lymond being like trying to help Robin keep his dignity, and Robin totally misses it.
That's what I saw too. Like Lymond is trying to give Robin a moment of respect and a moment of dignity, and he's trying to warn him like, don't waste this moment, like you could have something good come out of it, and Robin just totally doesn't at all. So
Not very smart. It's not very smart.
Robin cannot read the room.
No.
At all. No.
So we get some of the impacts right away of this ploy that the Queen Dowager did. Any hopes Lymond might have had of discreet anonymity on his second appearance in France had been decisively dashed. So then Robin tries to reveal that Tatty Boy and Lymond are one and the same, and he calls on Oliamro as his witness. But since Daubeny hasn't been implicated or believed that he's implicated, Oliamro won't agree about Lymond because he doesn't want Lymond to take the fall and get killed for Daubeny's crimes.
Right. Because at this moment, Tatty Boy is being blamed for poisoning the Queen, and
I don't know about the.
I think Tatty Boy's being blamed for all of it, for the disaster at like.
He's being blamed for the Tour de Minime. I don't know if they found out about the poisoning of the Queen. I don't think he's being blamed for that.
Because
Well,
it says
Robin Stewart's a would-be assassin, so I thought Robin was getting blamed for that.
He's being blamed for stealing some jewels that they faked, and he's being blamed for the Tour de Minime. I don't know if the thing about the poisoning ever came out.
due for the block for mass murder now that our other suspect is white is the German stuff. Oh yeah, okay. So the mass murderer thing and the stolen jewels.
Yeah, because it's not public knowledge that the Queen, Mary Queen of Scots, is the people are trying to kill her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My guess it is that Robin was, but nobody knows about the poisoned candy.
Right. Okay.
So then, yeah, Robin is his own worst enemy. He actually is in front of the king. He has his opportunity to say, that's Tatty Boy Bala. But instead, he starts going, I could have turned off the beast by myself. And then they all think he's just jealous that Lymond stole his audience, and they send him out without even listening. He's such a poor fool. And we end with Tatty Boy. We end this section with Tatty Boy, with Robin swearing vengeance on Tatty Boy. Tatty Boy Bala would suffer.
Yeah.
But Tatty Boy Bala's dead.
I feel like, Robin, I don't think it's gonna go well for you, buddy.
And there's this consistent thing with Robin also, where he knows they're different people, but he can't quite get it, so he keeps thinking of him as Tatty Boy and then correcting himself like Tatty Boy Lymond. So then there's this great little section. I love the way it starts. Gossip, bright-eyed and smiling, brought the news of this challenge to Lymond later in the afternoon and went away empty-handed. So he finds out about the verdict on Tatty Boy. It meant that the Tour de Minime and the spurious thefts were still attached to the name of Tatty Boy. And Lymond is finding the evidence of a vaguely damning nature very hard to disprove. So despite his massive intellect and resources, he can't quite come up with a way to clear Tatty Boy's name. And then we have him in the place he's staying. He's receiving visitors and abstractedly exercising his charm, which I just think is sort of interesting, because it's like his charm is just another tool in his toolbox that he's using. It worked with Harrison. It works with Martine. Like, how much of Lymond is real and how much is him acting for a purpose? And I actually don't think he knows. He doesn't know who he is and what to be. And so he ends up as, like Oliamro says, this puppet master that's manipulating people and trying to push them in certain directions without having any clue what he's doing with himself and who he is.
I think it's another reason he's so sensitive about being used as a tool by the Dowager Queen, because it doesn't help him see who he is. Like, it's just another way that his identity is determined by someone else instead of him.
Yeah.
And
to be fair, he has some idea who he is. Like, we had that whole speech in Game of Kings about his principles. You know, I prize freedom of the mind above freedom of the body and stuff like that. But
he's at sea in terms of, like, he's no longer master of culture. He's no longer leader of this band of men that he was. He's no longer like, what's he gonna do?
And aside from his relationship with his brother and his mother, which are real, he seems to have almost no relationships that are real. He's exercising his charm to get what he wants from people. All of his sexual relationships are, even if they're positive and joyous on both sides, they're still about getting things, that they're transactional in nature. So he doesn't have these like genuine human connections in his life very much, just his mom and his brother from what we can tell so far. Maybe Kate.
And it's like Kristen Stewart could have been that, and she's been replaced by Margaret, who I do think, like, Margaret sees him, I think, in some ways kind of like Kristen Stewart actually sees him, but she can't banter with him the same way. Like she can't be verbally equal with him, even if I do think that she actually is perceptive about who he is the way that Christian was. But he doesn't see that because she's not like sparkly and verbal and witty and sharp the way that Christian was.
Or maybe he sees it, but they just don't have that friendship.
Connection. Yeah.
Which I think then goes back to his, like, we get this despair in him sometimes, and of course she'll be in despair even though he knows all these people, he's so alone in the world, actually. He is not wearing his tabard anymore because he's covered in blood, and he wants to go see his people that he knew as Tabby Boy, but he can't until night because everyone now knows who he is, and he doesn't want to draw that connection of like, why is he going to see all the same people Tabby Boy used to hang out with? So he sneaks out at night and then goes and meets up with Oliamro and Archie at Oliamro's room, which is kind of funny because Oliamro ends up storming out of his own room. Which is just like so indicative of their relationship.
Just takes over everything.
Yeah. So we get, first of all, a great kind of catch up between them all. And a lovely explanation of Daubeny.
I loved it so much.
Because Archie's like, you think he's going to go after her again? That would be crazy. And Lymond says the smart answer to that is that we are all mad, but in fact, men who wreck whole ships and stampede elephants and destroy cavalcades of riders out of hand are probably less balanced than the rest. And then this great explanation of Daubeny's motivation. Lord Daubeny, if it hasn't already struck you, is a slightly stupid man of exquisite culture who has been living for years off the fat of his ancestors' reputation.
Yes. He's not a good villain, and he's super dramatic.
Funny because you guys figured all this out before, which is great.
Yeah, I really felt vindicated. It was so fun.
So yeah, everything in here is the stuff you already figured out, right? So he's in this position of power. You gotta just be happy with it. But because he's not as powerful as he thought he was going to be, he's looking for other opportunities. And he's like, his brother has potential to be a great power in Scotland and England. So he's doing this stuff to put his brother in power so that he can hopefully move up in the world in relation to his brother.
I mean, it's just an example of someone, like, he has so much. He has so much. He has so much power. He has so much money and position, and like, his life could be so good. And yet this one thing just eats at him. That's like the thing that he thought could happen didn't happen. And so therefore everything is ruined. And there's a part of me, I mean, not to get too esoteric or whatever, but there's a part of me is like, how often do we do that? Do we do that? You know, like, that we actually have a pretty good situation in life, but because this one thing we want or this one thing we expected isn't happening, it ruins our enjoyment of what we have. And, you know, how much of Daubeny lives in all of us?
Well, and I think that's why Lymond's acceptance of Kevin and his letting go of mid-culture is so important, because he could descend into the same kind of bitterness as Daubeny has, but he's a better person than that, and he lets it go and he moves on.
Yeah.
Another parallel between them, I don't know, I just saw it in this line that I thought was interesting. Daubeny set out to sweep aside Mary of Scotland, of course, but also to teach a lesson to the French court he was attempting to despise. That's exactly what Lymond set out to do, to teach a lesson to the French court he was attempting to despise. So it's just kind of funny, the parallel between them.
Like, the French court has learned nothing.
No. Both these guys are maybe a little arrogant.
Yeah, just a passing fact.
I don't think French court is going to come to terms with its own flaws at any time in the near future.
Yeah. So then Oliamro, he kind of confesses the pact between him and Robin, and Lymond's like, of course I already knew about it.
Why wouldn't you try that tack?
Of course you would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did feel for Oliamro when it says, like, whatever humanitarian impulse prompted him that afternoon, he was getting no thanks for it. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, buddy. Like, why could have at least given him a little, thanks.
Maybe this is part of why I think that Lymond knew the whole time that pact was going to happen, and that's why he was trying to get Oliamro to go talk to Robin, and that to help prompt the pact, he was presenting himself in the worst light.
Yeah. But he still could have given a little affirmation to him at this point, like, just like, because Oliamro still made the decision not to betray him. And
he doesn't give him any. And then also Oliamro is such a good guy. He says he's going to stay until the execution because he owes it to Robin to stay through it with him, which is just so sweet because they don't like each other at all, but still Oliamro has this sense of honor and sadness about this awful way Robin's going to die.
Yeah.
So then we get this big reveal where Oliamro says he's written a letter to Una and told her not to say anything about Daubeny and the people, the information she knows. And Lymond basically saying she's not innocent. She knew about the tour de Minime ahead of time. All these people were going to die, and she let it happen.
Yeah.
And
he kind of implies that if Daubeny is successful in killing the queen, that Oliamro will be partially at fault, because he says, and his lordship that was large-spirited of you, said Lymond, and his lordship may now do as he fancies. In other words, like, there's bigger issues here than Una.
But then Oliamro reveals his discovery that Cormac beats Una. Which is a shock to Lymond. He did not know about it. And then he gets upset. He's like, you left her with him? And Oliamro says, this is what she wants. It's her choice. And trying to take her away from him would just make him a martyr to her and make her situation even worse.
Which is, like, that happens. Like, you can't force someone to leave an abuser until they want to leave. And like, Oliamro, just this quiet acceptance on his part, like, she has no desire to leave him, said Oliamro simply. Whatever he thinks fit, she will accept. It's like,
does it change any of your interpretations of her behavior?
I think there's a real truth that things can be a reason why someone does something, but not an excuse for why they did something. So, like, her relationship with O'Connor and his treatment of her can be a reason why she does what she does, but I don't think it excuses what she does. So, do I have sympathy for her? Yes. Do I like her? No. So
then we get this sort of Oliamro Lymond, they're having a very passionate discussion about this. And Oliamro calls Lymond a hired sniffer at chairs and a licker of footmarks. And Lymond says, it's damn picturesque, said Lymond bitterly, but it doesn't alter facts. So this is, again, like he did at the end of part 3, chapter 6, Oliamro kind of describing Lymond as the servile prostitute for these powerful people. And this is the second time in these chapters we get Lymond described as bitter, which is the Daubeny and the Una and probably the Robin motif. So I do think this is an important thing that's going on with him and a parallel with him in these characters, and also this recurring theme of him as like a kind of prostitute. And I also liked Lyman's comment, you know, a normal man would be there making knife handles out of his bones. Like, it is kind of weird that you're in love with this woman and you're just letting her stay with this abusive guy and not trying to talk her out of it. Like, he accepts it really fast. And I know from experience, it's almost impossible to talk someone out of an abusive relationship. But at the same time, you want to be there with them, be there as a friend that they can reach out to if they need to. So just kind of completely leaving her is maybe not the best idea either.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, Guillermo is the opposite, like the polar opposite of a stalker. Like, he's not hanging around. He's not like hoping that she'll change his mind, that she'll change her mind, and, you know, following her, you know, in this town and that town. And I kind of wonder too if there's an element of the time period about this decision, because you can't hang around, like, she's a woman who's attached to another man, like, and she refuses to leave him. He can't hang around her. Like, they can't be friends. They can't, you know, there's no mechanism in society for men and women to be platonic friends as adults. And so it's kind of like, what can he do? You know?
Yeah. Although it's not public that she is with O'Connor. So as far as anyone knows, she's independently like courting a potential partner. So Guillermo leaves, storms out of his own room, and leaves Lyon behind with Archie. And Archie makes an interesting comment. He talks about Guillermo being in love with Una, and then he says, "You're smitten a wee bit yourself." And Lymond says, "Maybe," but the narrator tells us it was not the voice of a man in love. What do you make of that?
I think that's maybe the narrator's way of saying, or Lyman's way of saying, yes, I have interest in her, but it doesn't lie in a sexual nature. It's like, I need information out of her. She's got something that I need, and I'm going to do what I do and use her to get it.
Or that he admires her in some ways. You know, he is interested in her. She's intriguing. She's a strong woman. She's fierce. She makes decisions. He's like, that's attractive.
Yeah.
But
and
he's in love with her.
Yeah, when we were in his point of view, when he was in, she had him like held prisoner after the Tour de Minime, he was admiring her when she was challenging him, and like, you've been set up for all this stuff. He admired her, and he thought she was beautiful. So I think he's very attracted to her, but he's not in love with her.
He's not in love with her. Like, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I think if circumstances were different and she was in a different position and they were in different circumstances and all this hadn't happened, like, maybe there's potential, like, if they got to know each other and all that, but not here, not now.
So then we get our big reveal that Robin Stewart has escaped.
Also, Lymond has a spare card up his sleeve, which
we don't know about.
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
I don't know. Like, so he said, you know, what would you give to change places with me? A night in my lioness's cage. In other words, no. And then Robin Stewart's skin is saved, but the lass is yet to suffer. I have a spare card up my sleeve, says Francis Crawford, in case of need. And if you're comparing the two, I did Robin no service today, and I probably do none for O'Dwyer tonight. So, like, he can't help either of them, but there's something else. I don't know.
Maybe it's some sort of information about the Lennoxes. I don't know. They're related to Daubeny, so maybe he got something out of them or about them.
Somehow he's got there's something else in play here.
Because we know the Lennoxes are coming. They're going to be part of the English contingency that's coming, I think, on June the 19th.
Yeah. maybe there's something to do with the Earl of Warwick and his involvement, which there's, because they made a point earlier about the French and the English becoming friends, and like the Earl of Warwick is, you know, he's going to, I think there's something about doing something to Somerset and blah blah blah. And so there was all this talk about the English and the French. So it could be that Francis has got a way to sort of throw a wrench into all of that. And there was also an explicit mention, I can't remember how it said, but it was something implying that the young queen would not marry the Dauphin, that Scottish and English plan was going to get thwarted. And we know that doesn't happen. Like, the young queen does marry the Dauphin, so maybe there's something with that coming up. I don't know. I can't remember.
So the big kind of cliffhanger that we end on is, because Robin Stewart is free, this frees up Domini to kill Mary Queen of Scots and blame it on Robin. Oh no. So any other thoughts on these chapters, and what do you think is going to happen next, and what do you hope and want to see?
I feel like we're moving towards the end, so there's got to be some sort of final confrontation with Robin. I think he's gonna die. I hope he dies. I still have some hope that he does realize some of this, like there's a message that in some way there's a message that Lymond sends him that he receives somehow, like that actually comes to pass. Mm-hmm. But I'm skeptical that that's not going to happen. That he's gonna.
I think I said this last time, but I still want Robin to be the reason for Daubeny's downfall. I mean, we already saw in the trial that Robin clearly stating, like, Daubeny is to blame, like, he's implicit in this, didn't do anything. So, like, if Robin can find some sort of proof to back that up, or if, I don't know, if Robin at least gives that proof to Lymond so that he can take care of it.
If somehow that he can do some sort of, I still want him to be able to do some sort of like grand dying gesture that somehow makes, it's not going to redeem his life because he's done some pretty horrible things, but somehow dies honorably in some way, you know, that
yeah.
I would like that to happen. And I still really want the king to have some sort of moment where he acknowledges all of this and does something that like he's rejected, like he's complicit because he was told that D'Aubigny's doing this, and it seems like he didn't even try to find it. He's just like, nope, not true. And so I'd like to have something to do with that, and I want to see something happen with Liam Rowe, you know.
What do you want to see happen with Liam Rowe?
I'd like him to somehow defeat O'Connor, and for him to.
Yeah, we don't like O'Connor at all.
O'Connor's not a good leader for Ireland. Like, I don't even know what's going on with Ireland, but I feel like this guy in charge is a bad idea. So whereas Liam Rowe, as much as he's reluctant to take charge and as much as he's reluctant to take on that responsibility, I think that very reluctance is a sign that he would be good at it, or at least way better than O'Connor. So I'd like to see him maybe go back to Ireland and determine to take that on.
I'd like to see Liam Rowe and Una end up together, but I really think Lymond's going to really complicate things in the next chapter, like, because he's going to see Una. So
I do not want Liam Rowe and Una to be together because I think Una would be bad for him. Like, I want her to get away from O'Connor, and I'd like her to have some healing and get away from her aunt. Like, I'd like her to go somewhere and be like not abused, but I'm not sure that this woman is a woman who would necessarily be good for Liam Rowe. Like,
Philippe, what would you like about them? What would you want to see with them together?
I don't even know, to be honest. I have to put more thought into that. I just don't want to see her end up with Lymond either.
Oh no.
Definitely not. But
no. I feel like Laura might fall into the trap that I think is common that stereotypically women fall into, which is like, I'm going to heal this damaged person, and like my love for this person who's been wounded is going to fix them. And that's always a bad idea. Like that never works out. So like, I don't want him to do that. But
I actually think Una and Oliemro would be a great couple because his innocence is what would, like, we already saw it sort of reaching her and moving her because she's so used to people using her and being very experienced. His innocence is maybe one thing that could break through to her, and because he so struggles to like step up and take action, and she's very good at that, but she's doing it in a bad way. So the combination of her mind and her action orientation with his good heart and his moderation in some world could actually go really well together. But you're right that there's like many risks involved in this because of how damaged she is.
Yeah, maybe I think you're absolutely right. I think like their weaknesses and their strengths complement each other. Like they could make as a pair, as a partnership, they would make a really good partnership. But like she needs to deal with some stuff first. Like I just want her to kind of to heal from some of this really drastic abuse that she's under. So maybe if she's able to take some time and come to terms with that, they would be good. Yeah.
Anything else you guys are hoping for?
I don't know. I want Lymond to be okay, but I feel like that's my hope for the entire series. Be okay at the end.
Yeah. We got a lot more books to go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
All right. See you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.